Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. You know the drill. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are catching this episode or where you might be watching this episode. This week, I have Steve Swan, who stands at the helm of the Swan Group executive search firm as its CEO and principal, carving a niche in the pharma biotech industries with a keen focus on IT. His fervor for industry insights offer a knack, really, for bridging the gap between top professionals and industry demands, which has been instrumental in elevating organizations and propelling careers forward. And if that's not enough, Steve also hosts the popular podcast, which I was also on. So thanks, Steve, for having me on. And that podcast is Biotech Bites. It's a show that offers a stage for dialogue with IT luminaries in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. And while I am not an IT luminary, nor am I in biotech or the pharma industries, I hope that I was able to add some value, but it was a really great experience nonetheless. And a little bit about Steve personally, outside of work, he was once an avid mountain bike racer and has reignited his passion for cycling and ultimately aspires to traverse the United States on two wheels. He lives in New Jersey, my home state, with his wife and two daughters. Steve, thanks for coming on my podcast now.
Sure. No, and you are a luminary, so you.
Oh, thank you.
You took that away from yourself. I'm giving it.
Thank you. Luminary is a great word, actually. So I a great adjective. I appreciate that. This week, we're going to be talking a lot about what you do, which is really, of course, recruiting, but we'll speak about some of the changing dynamics within HR related to recruiting, and something that we had only kind of scratched the surface on your podcast was
Right.
this, influence of AI on both of our, kind of arenas. So maybe with that, why don't we start with what are some of the changing dynamics in what you're doing? What are you seeing, I guess, related to recruiting that's changing potentially the industry on the whole?
With AI specifically, I think that what's changing is so when we talked a little bit yesterday, we talked about some of the ways that and I'm going to kind of go back to it, right? So we talked a little bit about how metrics have helped people, and maybe some folks have gotten complacent, lazy, right? And relying on that a little too much. I think we've gotten to that point a little bit with AI recently, right? Because we've taken AI and we've given it, in my opinion, a little too much responsibility, if you will, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that what we've done is we've said to AI, okay, great, you're perfect, you're smart, you can get this done for us, but it can do a little piece of it of what we do in recruiting or in HR, but it's not going to run the whole range, right? It's not going to run your whole workforce. It's not going to run the whole process of recruitment, right? So there's bits and pieces in there that it can help you with, and I did a podcast the other day with a gentleman who talked about how AI really is the tool that's going to help the human become faster, smarter, better. And the folks that use it will become faster, smarter, better, and they'll pass the others that aren't using it. So, maybe your 8-hour day, 2 hours is you're using AI. So you've now eliminated 2 hours of your tasks. You still got the other 6 hours, and then the other 2 hours, you can go to higher level tasks. So the trend that I see, just to kind of be blunt about it, is I think we're a little over our skis on it. We're out in front of ourselves a little bit. When it comes to AI, and I think that I think we're coming back, meaning we're getting to reality with it. We're really understanding what it can and can't do, but it's taken some time, and it's going to keep taking time. Like when the internet came out in the early 90s, right? It was kind of like this is going to replace, and it didn't. But it's still
it didn't. Right. It's a great tool. This is kind of what I was trying to touch on too, when you had asked me, when I was in the hot seat, so to speak, and you had asked me questions around how I felt about AI. And I really think that anytime something new or something is or feels new to us, even though AI is certainly not new, there is this immediate sense of fear. Oh my gosh, what does this mean for my job? Oh my gosh, what does this mean for my industry? And this comes up a lot in HR. I get a lot of emails and messages about people figuring out or wanting to figure out how to future-proof their jobs or being afraid that they'll be replaced. It especially happens with folks in recruiting, or I should say it especially comes up with folks in recruiting. And I can only further emphasize what you said, which is that it is a tool and we have to figure out how to best harness its power and what it's
Right.
able to do for us.
Right. Right. I mean, so our company, the Swan Group, which I haven't gone through this with you. My mom started this company.
Oh
So
my
my
goodness.
mom started this in the early 70s when I was about this big, right?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so she told me that when the fax machine came along, the fax was supposed to replace the recruitment industry. What are we going to
Oh
do?
my
We're not going to be calling the
These
hiring
poor
managers and
recruiters.
describing candidates, and we're not going to be putting resumes in snail mail anymore. It's a fax machine. Now what? Right? So think about how
That
ridiculous
is,
that looks today, right?
yeah, the fax is not even a thing anymore.
Will we be saying that about AI? I don't know, but yeah, my mother started this a long time ago.
Wow, that's amazing. And actually, well, kudos to her, but it's also a really interesting window into the evolution of recruiting and probably HR in general, because things moved so much more slowly. And if anything, AI has sped up processes
It
tremendously.
has.
And one of the things that we kind of talked on about or touched on your podcast was this element to what is a good metric versus what is a bad metric. And so I think about the speed at which we move thanks to AI and how we don't lose quality within our process, within, the candidate experience, especially, and how we create some guardrails around how we use AI. Because to one of the things that we talked about, hopefully all the listeners will listen to the episode from your podcast, but one of the things that we talked about was that it's great to have a target when we think about how long we want to spend on filling roles. Maybe that's 50 days, maybe that's 60 days, maybe it's more or less. But there are roles that just inevitably take longer. And so with the advent or the incorporation of AI speeding that up, how do we ensure that it doesn't devalue the quality boundaries that are kind of part of the process with recruiting, whether it's, ensuring that there are reference checks or that we are, assessing all possible top candidates against one another, doing panel interviews. Like, I think that a lot of people are concerned that AI will replace some of those elements that are currently human driven within the process.
Yeah, and inevitably, when we speed something up, we could be cutting corners, right? And like we had previously talked about, you and I, the speed to fill or whatever it's called, that metric, right? When folks are, looking at that pretty closely, that also causes some cutting corners because that gets incentivized, right? Economic incentives
Yeah.
could push somebody to make that quicker or faster than it should be, right? But I think one of the things, I've had this question before. I think one of the things with AI is people have asked me, in your opinion, what's being sort of overestimated in your industry and what's being underestimated? Personally, I think that AI is being overestimated, right? Because it's going to replace the whole process, which it can. It can help us identify people at the front end. But I also think one of the things that's overestimated about recruiters and recruitment, when you compare it to AI, is, we're called the folks that find the purple squirrel sometimes, because like you said, if we take too much time with a role, that's when you hand it to the Swan Group, right? If it's taken 6 of your hours and you only have 1 or 2 a week to allocate to it, hand it off to Swan. Let him spend 15 hours a week on it or 20 hours a week on it. He can handle it. It's worth paying for that. Let's get that done. Let's get the right person. But when I say that, we're it's overestimated that we're the finders of the purple squirrels, I think we all have kind of access to the same folks, right? 95% of them, right? So AI and the Swan Group has access to the same folks. It's how we engage them. It's how we talk to them. It's how we interact with them, right? So I'm not finding the purple squirrel, but I'm engaging the purple squirrel, and then I'm closing the purple squirrel at the end.
Yeah.
Again, AI is going to help you find it. They're going to cut your list down, but then after that, there's still a lot of work to do. I always call drivers, find their drivers, understand the candidate's drivers, but really understand the manager's drivers too, right? If you're matching those together, you're making a great marriage. It's going to last a long time. Lots of folks think that, okay, if I cut to the end and I give him or her a salary that's close to what they want, that should be it. Well, there's a lot that goes into the middle, I was never going to commute that far. That company's mission doesn't work for me. I didn't like the color of the carpets. The bathroom was dirty. I mean, you never know, right?
Totally. You never know. And it's actually a really good point that the significant difference between a human and AI technology is that you're going to have the opportunity to have face to face, whether that's virtual or in person, opportunities with someone where you really establish relationships and you have a great communication kind of foundation. I've worked with many recruiters. I have also worked with recruiters as someone that was like a candidate in processes. And I think that the biggest difference between a really good recruiter, or in your case, a really good search firm, and someone or a firm that is not so great is that communication that you talk about, and also the relationship that's built. I mean, I'm not looking for new employment, and I have recruiters that I still am connected with because we almost like developed friendships over the course of years of working with one another. And that's a very specific and unique difference that AI just can't compete with, at least not today.
It can't. And some managers have recently come to me, we've had several turndowns, right, on our roles. And that's because the relationship wasn't built between, whether it's the company or the manager or the recruitment process and the candidate, right? Because they just didn't feel a connection there, and
Yeah,
or it wasn't fully understood what their true drivers are and what they were looking for in that process, and some things have to be explained or flexible or all the above. And
totally.
you got to really understand and get to all those things. Otherwise you would know before you get to turn 3 or turn 4, whatever it is, that it's time to back out. It's not going to work. Nobody gets an offer from the Swan Group unless it's going to get accepted. Once before I get to turn 4, I'm talking to the manager or the HR folks. I'm talking to the individual. This number's a yes. This number's a maybe. If you want to risk that, this number's a no.
Hmm.
And if they don't tell me they can get to the yes, I go to the candidate and say, they're not going to get you to this yes. So I think we're done. And if they say, well, I'd really accept that maybe, I'd go back and tell the company, hey, they'd accept the maybe,
Yeah.
but otherwise, I don't want them to go for the approvals and the signatures and send out an offer letter. I mean,
Yeah, and then just for it to be, yeah, and this is also how you maintain your own brand reputation also, because then it's like you have this, you know, fabulous percentage of acceptances from the
100% in the
candidates
last
that you're
3 years.
putting forward. Yeah. Oh, 100% in the last 3 years. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
because I'm not, maybe the companies, they could get upset and say, well, let's just give them the offer.
Yeah, it's like it's not gonna work
That's not
out.
how that goes, man. Let's not do that.
Right.
So
I'm
anyway,
curious, do you find that let me think of what I'm like
she's lost
trying
for
to
words. I've
ask.
never seen this.
I know I'm lost because I have like 3 questions and I'm like, which question is the right one to ask first? Maybe it's this one. Do you find that and maybe I don't know if you've had like since your mom built the Swan Group, if you've just kind of like started working right after, right when you were like ready to start your career, or if you worked elsewhere as a recruiter first. But I'm curious if you think that being kind of part of or being an external search firm and effectively an external recruiter for certain roles, if that enables the relationship between the employer and the candidate to be like just part of an easier process and more easily built because the candidate feels supported by you and the employer feels supported by you, versus someone who's internal, let's say, who is employed by the company and maybe doesn't have the same flexibility potentially that you
There
have.
are different dynamics there. There really are.
Mm,
So the first one is the communication, right? So I can be, so I could talk about this all day. So the communication piece, right? I mean, I can call them and say, I don't know something. It's going to be tougher for an internal person to call and say, I don't know anything. They can
yeah.
still do it, but it's easier for me to do that.
Yeah.
You also have the piece where you are coming around turn 4 with the offer coming. The company and I can work together on the offer, and I can then work with the candidate to be certain that is going to work for them, even if it's below what they're looking for. So we can really, I can work on the candidate in a different way than the organization can,
Yeah.
So that works to my advantage and to our advantage as long as we're working together, right?
Sure.
Candidates do feel better when they hear a lot of updates, and I can do that. Companies sometimes can't do that. The
Yeah.
final thing, and I'm just hitting these real quick. I'm not. I could talk all day. The final thing is when an internal company recruiter goes to recruit, right? I have a certain lineage of how I approach somebody. First, I have to call them. I have to identify them. Then I have to qualify them. Then I have to make sure that they're interested in the role. If you're internal, it's a different order. They've already seen your posting. So they
Right.
think they're interested. So they think they're here already by the time they contact you. But first and they think they're qualified. So first I have to qualify them. Then I have to see if identify them, qualify them, and then see if they're interested. They already think they're interested and qualified. So in my opinion, I think the internal folks a lot of times from that perspective are at a disadvantage.
Mm.
They can't feed information out as it's fit, because when I first speak to somebody, I don't launch into my spiel about a role. I never do that. I want to hear you tell me about you, and I want to hear what you're, because the first thing someone talks about, or the thing they talk about the most, are really at the top of their list for drivers and motivations, right? Same
Totally.
thing with a manager. And you got to treat it the same. So if I'm matching these things up, boy, I'm in good shape,
Totally.
But if you don't feel it and you don't see that, then you're in trouble. And again, I think it does put the internal folks at a disadvantage because they can't do that. They've already seen the description. They know the company. So they're going to tell you stuff you want to hear, I think.
Yeah.
The internal
Yeah, definitely. Look, it happens where we see people who, talk the talk and then they don't walk the walk after they're hired. And it happens. I'm sure it happens more than we even realize, but it's an interesting perspective that you share that, maybe there is a bit of a disadvantage in some cases where, it's like dating. If someone knows everything about you, but you don't know everything about them,
Yeah.
they can tell you exactly what you want to hear.
And you're like, what?
You're like,
No.
"This is
Wow,
great.
this is great. This is awesome. And
Yeah,
all of
we're
a
gonna
sudden,
get married."
next thing you know, you're like, what has
You're like,
happened?
"Who is that?"
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Someone
exactly.
calling you from jail looking for bail money or
Yeah,
something.
right. I always come back to, like, it's funny because I always talk about, like, how hiring and work and all this stuff is so adjacent to dating and relationships, and so I feel like the listeners are probably used to me finding some sort of correlation there, but it really is so similar in so many ways. But I'm curious because I get a lot of outreach about this in particular because I help people with, like, their resumes and LinkedIn and stuff like that. And it's, how do I market myself so that when someone is sourcing and looking for a candidate, not necessarily just, passively applying as the candidate, but when someone in your situation, for example, is actively looking for someone, how can they make their resumes or their LinkedIn stand out against so many other qualified people? I know it's a loaded question.
No, I mean, and in today's day and age, that's more relevant than it's been, right? With AI, like we talked about, and
Hmm.
I think everybody sets their algorithms up differently, so I can't speak to how to actually set the resume up. I just tell folks to be truthful on there, and don't put
Definitely.
anything on there you can't talk about. Number one. Number two, you do have to redo your resume for each opening, right? Each opening is different, and each opening has different qualities that they're looking for. The top few bullets usually are the things they want to hear about the most. Just like in a resume, the top few bullets you put there are the things you're best at, right? If you've done work in an SAP system and you don't want to do any document, I'm just throwing these things out, certain document systems or whatever. The hiring manager doesn't want to hear about that. So don't put your document systems on there. Talk more about the business, because folks' careers are so long and they've done so many things. If they put everything on there, it's going to be the size of a phone book, and no one's going to
Yeah.
read that. Now I'm okay with a several page resume, 3, 4, 5 pages. I don't mind, and I'll send that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I will. As long as it's telling a story.
Huh.
But lots of times those long resumes don't tell a story, and they're just a dump of what they've done, and it's a dump of your consulting work typically. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's no good.
That's so interesting to hear because my rule of thumb is, like, 2 pages feels like enough. And unless you have 50 years of experience and you're still working, I
Right.
don't know that more than 2 is something that I would ever, write or recommend. But at the same time, I think to your point, it's like, how do you tell a story? In some of my advice and even some of my experience, when you're using an AI based tool, you see a resume or even probably just any type of applicant tracking system, frankly, you see a resume pop up. And the first thing that we do is like assess just visually, is this something that I can read or is this something that is like not translating in my mind? This is
Right.
at least how I see things. I have seen resumes where I'm like, I can't read this. I literally like it's in English. I can read it, but I can't read it.
Depends on the time of day, the day of the week, what you
Yeah,
had for
right.
lunch, those kinds of things.
Yeah, right, right,
Yeah.
right. And, I think part of that too is when I think about a multi page resume, it is to me pretty important that someone looking at a glance, assuming that someone is not spending more than a minute on each resume, if they are
They don't.
internal, right? Like if in your case, I'm sure you spend much more time looking at resumes and much more time with candidates. And unfortunately, I don't know that that's the same for an internal process where they're seeing hundreds of applicants on one job posting. Nevertheless, I don't want to assume the person's resume has to really be able to share at least 5 years of experience in that first page,
Correct.
because otherwise like you're not going to get them. You're not going
No.
to grab their attention
No.
necessarily.
Yeah, no, then they will gloss over that. And you're right. Does someone spend a minute on a resume? They don't even spend that much time. They spend
They might
15
not.
seconds, 30 seconds
Yeah.
most, But, the 3, 4, I mean, again, not a lot of 5 pages, but 3, 4 pages. Again, I don't have an issue with if they're full-time roles and they do run through a lineage, 20 years of experience. It starts out where it's super technical,
Sure.
and then it graduates to this and it graduates to that. And now you're doing the strategy and the architecture work or something along those lines.
Right. And to be fair, I mean, having a long resume is not going to like result in someone saying, "Oh, I can't." Like I'm glossing over this. I think if anything, it would be a visually unappealing resume that would get that reaction first, and a long resume would probably just result in someone not getting to the end.
Right.
But I
Which is
guess
fine.
on the AI side, which is fine, right? But on the AI side, like you might have more keywords in your
You might.
resume, so maybe we'll see the pendulum swing in that direction.
You could, yeah, and yeah, you're right. I was going to say maybe they would set it up to only scan the first 2 pages, but why would you? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like why?
No
Right,
skin off your back, right? To have it
right.
scan 5 versus 2 versus 7, whatever.
Right, right. It's interesting because some of the things I've seen in like recent months actually is, we have, for example, at my company, we use an applicant tracking system and we have screening questions that are set up. So when someone applies to a job, they have to answer specific questions. Are you located in X country or state, because we hire in like specific states in the US? Or if we're hiring in a country in EMEA or wherever, we ask that, right? And then it's like, do you have 5 or more years experience of X? And I'll see that and I'm not a recruiter, but I am obviously involved in many aspects of the
Of course.
recruiting process. But I'll see that people will answer yes. And then the resume will say, actually, the answer is no.
I know.
So it's like, do you see that even in your own
I
your
see
own
that
firm?
stuff all the time. And when I talk to somebody, I say, okay, listen, what you're telling me is different than what's on your resume. Okay. So let's look at your LinkedIn profile. Is LinkedIn and your resume consistent, And then I suggest, because I know a few people that I've known over the years that write resumes, but it's inevitable now. They do resumes and LinkedIn. They got to do
Yeah.
both,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's those two things are your marketing pieces. If you're not doing those, you're not making them consistent, you got a problem. But
Yeah.
also know what it says and be able to talk to it.
Totally. Like, don't say that you're based in India if you're not.
Right.
Just don't do that.
Don't.
I'm curious, I don't know that I asked you this, but what inspired you to create your podcast? Because you are in this niche, you are focused on, biotech and pharma, and it is a specific industry also that yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. So the short answer, but let me give you the long answer. So, I have all these conversations all day, every day, right, with all these leaders, and when we hang up the phone, it's gone. It's like the tree falls in the woods. And there's nothing there no one there to hear it. So we were coming home from Germany from Oktoberfest a couple of years ago. We're
Cool.
midair. I turned to my wife and I said, I'm starting a podcast. She goes, go back to sleep. What are you talking about? So I said, no, I talked to so many leaders that this would be awesome. I think they would love it. It's a very collaborative group. I would love it. It would get me, you know, just to do something different. Not that I need to see or hear myself, because that doesn't really get me going. But yeah, and I brought it back to some of my CIOs, and I mentioned to them, they're like, "This is great. This is awesome." And I thought it was going to be, you know, some flowery hippie idea where I was doing it on my cell phone, but I had to get the production company and the whole thing, and it's worked. I like it. You know, I've been doing it now for about a year and a half or so, and it's just really the big picture was to share different folks' perspectives, so other folks in my community, in the leadership, biotech leadership, IT community, could just hear what others are doing. I even got to the point where I was doing some like big dinners and meetings with folks. I have a bunch of CIOs come together to just rub elbows and just say hello. And they would always say to me, you know, that other groups have tried to do that, but other groups are trying to sell them something, you know, all day long. And that wasn't my intent. You know, I just kind of wanted it because they really just like collaborating and doing their thing. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's amazing. No, I think that's awesome. As a fellow podcaster, I do think that you're doing a great job. And what's something that someone told me once is that the more focused you are on your particular niche, the better you'll, the more success you'll find. Not that, I mean, we talked about this offline, that we didn't necessarily start our podcast with this like goal in mind to build it as a business or anything like that. But certainly it's possible. And it's interesting to see how, for you in this like particular industry, and for me, focused on HR as an industry, there really is so much to talk about. Like, I've been doing this for 4.5 years, and there are weeks where I'm like, oh, I have to like really spice things up. Like, what is like the latest and greatest? What are we going to talk about? And then other times I'm like, wow, there's so, like, you could, for example, with AI, we could really continue to talk about this. Like, there are so many facets to this shift in the world that really kind of give us a lot of space to ideate and bring on other people's perspectives. I'm sure there are people who disagree with us. I'm sure there are people who do agree with us.
Yeah, that's what makes the world go round, right?
Totally. It's really interesting. And I guess, like, to kind of begin closing us out on some of these talking points, I'm curious if you have any advice for the listeners who either are in recruiting and really enjoy where they are and they want to build, maybe they want to build something of their own at some point one day, or they want to grow their careers. Do you have any advice that maybe has been given to you that's worked well that you can impart on them?
I was going to actually kind of go there. You gave me a backdoor into what I wanted to bring up.
Love it.
Like I said earlier, my mother started this, right? And she was I was a psychology major, and I always study the psychology of, as I think you do too, it seems to me, the psychology of what's going on. And I study the psychology of the recruitment process. And as we get close to the close, right? And that's why I was able to say that I have, 100% close rate over the last several years, because A, I don't let that offer go out to people, but B, I think that people get in their own way, right? So I've read books on this and talk about it. You can call it emotional intelligence, you can call it whatever you want, but really what it comes down to is we get too emotional with big decisions. We're humans, right? Mm-hmm. So over the last 10,000 years, we've really focused a lot on, or we've had to, our fight or flight, right, response. And when emotions get heightened, that's what happens. We start freaking out, we start screaming or whatever, we run or whatever it is. But, you have to eliminate that from your thought processes, because, we weren't meant to change jobs or buy stocks or buy a car or buy a house. Those are big decisions, and we get all heightened. And, what I tell folks to do, whether it's an individual or whether it's a recruiter or somebody in HR, really try and eliminate those emotions, right? And the way that you can best bring someone back to the ground is by talking to them about, going one direction or the other, saying yes or no to this decision. What's it going to look like in 3 days, 3 months, 3 years, or 2 years, whatever it is. And then you can start really visualizing, because I always talk to the candidate about how we were brought together by logic. We walked down this path logically. Now all of a sudden we're getting emotional, right? We're worried about where the bathroom is. We're worried about this or that or the other thing, the what ifs or the devil I don't know, those kinds of things. But your logic then leaves you and you start getting all freaked out about it. And that's what causes folks to say either no or not really know what they want at the end. They know what they want. They knew what they wanted all along. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep talking to me for the 8 weeks we've been talking, you know?
Right.
And so my advice to everybody is to try and check their emotions and really understand when you're making, when you're thinking logically and when you're thinking emotionally. If you can separate those two and understand that, you're going to make, not only in this, right? In buying a stock or buying a car, or buying a house or getting married or whatever, you're making, logical decisions, and that's going to serve you well for the long term.
Yeah. Oh man, I totally agree with that. That's awesome.
I gave it to you.
I love it. No, it's so true. It's so true. And it takes a little while to realize, like, to have that self-awareness or to build that skill and develop that skill. But it's hard. But
we're
once
animals,
you do,
we're human. It's not in us.
Totally. No, it's primal for us to be like, yeah,
to freak
it's
out.
true. And in terms of like the devil that we don't know, that is so common. People are like really excited about their new thing and they're going for it. And then they get an offer and they're like, oh my God, like I've been at this company for 7 years. I know what, I know exactly what it's like. I know who I'm working with. What if they hate me? What if I hear actually from one of my friends who has been at a company for a very long time and has been focused on leaving for a very long time. And every time there's an opportunity, this friend kind of finds a way to get out of it. And I always say to them, like, it's okay. It's okay to go into a new experience and to be a little bit afraid and try something new. But they ultimately are always afraid of like having job instability. But the reality is that the most stable job is unstable. Like you never have a 100% guarantee. You just have
everything
to
has
see
its
everything.
worth, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like there's never a bad experience. Like you learn something from every single thing that you do. So that's a really helpful anecdote that you shared.
Yeah. And I think that, your friend, the person you just referred to, is the classic example of what I just highlighted.
Yeah, totally.
They're logical, and all of a sudden, boom, they see the finish line. And they're like, uh-oh, this is real, right?
Yeah, and then they start running backwards. It's true. You're like, no, come back. But Steve, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I'm so glad that we did this little swap, and I'll make sure that everyone has a link to your podcast and our episode that we did together in the show notes, as well as all of the places where they can connect with you. So thank you so much for everything. And actually, speaking of which, where should people connect with you? What's the best way for them to get in touch?
I think the best way would be on our website, www.swangroup.net.
Perfect.
Yeah,
amazing.
The podcasts are all posted there, and all of our contact information's on there. That's the best place. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Steve Swan. Swan Group. Yeah.
In that case, I'll link both. And again, really appreciate all of your insights and all of your time.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.